evening and welcome to Greenlight Bookstore. We're excited to host tonight's event with Ruchira Gupta presenting her new book, I Kick and I Fly. She will be sharing the stage with Gayle Forman, so you're in for an excellent evening. Our interviewer for this evening is award-winning author and journalist, Gayle Forman. Gayle has written several best-selling novels, including I Have Lost My Way, Leave Me, the Just One series, and If I Stay, which has been translated into more than 40 languages and was adapted into a movie. Gayle's essay and nonfiction work have appeared in the New York Times, Elle, The Nation, and Time. She lives in Brooklyn, New York, with her husband and daughters. She'll be speaking with our featured author, Ruchira Gupta. Ruchira is a writer, feminist campaigner, professor at NYU, and founder of the anti-sex trafficking organization, APNI, Women Worldwide. She has won the Clinton Global Citizen Award, the Sierra Bengali Award, and an Emmy for Outstanding Investigative Journalism. She has helped more than 20,000 girls and women in India exit prostitution systems. She has also edited As If Women Matter, an anthology of Gloria Steinem's essays, and written manuals on human trafficking for the UN Office for Drugs and Crimes. Ruchira divides her time between Delhi and New York. In her debut novel, a propulsive social justice adventure, I Kick and I Fly is an inspiring, hopeful story of triumph about a girl in Bihar, India, who escapes being sold into the sex trade when a local hostel owner helps her to understand the value of her body through kung fu. Ruchira will be reading from the book, then Gayle will join the conversation, and then you'll all have the chance to ask your questions after that. Please join me in welcoming to the stage Ruchira Gupta and Gayle Forman.
I have to say, Ruchira, if I hadn't known you for 25 years, I would be very intimidated after that introduction.
I'm intimidated.
Grab your mic.
Okay.
Yeah, I've been bossing her around all day. I'm so excited to be, this is your first bookstore event since the book came out, right?
Absolutely.
So let's all raise our glasses and congratulations. And I also just want to welcome you to the wonderful club of kidlit authors, which is a very special group, as you're going to see. And I really want to start talking to you about activism, because I think there's something for writing for children that is activist in and of itself. And I think there's a lot of kidlit authors who feel like what they do is more than just writing, that there is something about writing for young people and about young people that is trying to mold a world. So I want to start off by asking how somebody who's been a lifelong activist decided that now is the time to kind of take that activism into writing for children.
You know, I wanted to write for young adults because I thought that they are the future and they are the present. And something which happens to young people is not talked about to young people. My book is about human trafficking. It's about a girl who escapes human trafficking by becoming a Kung Fu champion, and how she discovers the power of her body through the practice of Kung Fu. And I felt that, you know, this is happening to her. She's 14 years old, and why can't I talk to 14-year-old people about this? And very often I've noticed in our communities, in our society, things which happen to kids, we don't talk to them about it. This is, you know, always there. So I said, you know, I'm going to write a book which has a girl who's a hero, and also for other girls and boys who can read about someone like them. And everybody today is dealing with issues like body shaming, bullying, sexual abuse. The Center for Disease Control has come out with a survey that in America right now, teen mental health is a big issue, and 1 in 5 girls is reporting rape, and so many boys are reporting loneliness and bullying. So we have to talk to them about it, and that's why I wrote for young people, because I want to share with them that they can fight back, and through the character of Hira, they will know that they can fight back.
100%. We were talking earlier because we met when I worked at 17 Magazine, writing the kinds of articles that nobody thought teenagers would read, and how young people seem to care very deeply about people who seemed on the surface very different from them, like in other countries undergoing different kind of situations that they could imagine, but there was this deep well of understanding and empathy of sort of, it was almost like this community of young people, because you understand what it is like to be disempowered just by dint of your age and the adults having agency over you. So I'm so glad that you did. I'm also so glad that you wrote this book, because I will make a confession right now, which is sometimes when somebody you know says, I have a book, will you read it? You're like, yeah, sure. And this book reads like a house on fire. Like, I opened it up, it was just propulsive. I could not put it down. It was joyful, which is not something you would expect for a book that deals with sex trafficking, but I want to talk about that. I want to talk about the world that you created, which obviously is a world you know so well. And it's such a nuanced world. Like, there's some villains here in terms of like the trafficking, you know, the international traffickers, but the individuals, the families who were often not really serving their children well, you really treat with care and love. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, because it's all based on truth. My story that I've written about in I Kick and I Fly, I ran this NGO in the red light district of Fort Bisranch, which is the setting of the book, and I met girls, I met boys, I met adults, men and women who were complicated. They were neither fully good nor fully bad, but they were victims of circumstances. And I saw how, with incredible courage, they actually came together to challenge their circumstances. I saw families come apart. I saw families come back together and hate and love, and also the presence of organized crime, hierarchy, oppressive hierarchies, and how even very little girls stood up to this. And in my book, of course, Hira, the 14-year-old girl, fights to get back into school, but she doesn't do it alone. There's a women's rights advocate who helps her to enroll in a Kung Fu program. There's her mother who's cutting stones on the highway, and she is fighting her circumstances, but she also stands up to an alcoholic husband and to the criminal overlord who lives in that street where the strip of brothels are. And all of them have something positive and something negative. Her mother is normally submissive to the husband, but she stands up for her daughter. The husband, who's an alcoholic, thinks that he can't ever protect his daughter, so he becomes kind of immune to his circumstances and almost desensitized. But there's an arc in his story. And the same thing with the class bully, or and the corrupt cop. So everybody has a very singular trait, but then there's an arc that they go through, and I think that's what life is like. And I saw this happen in my NGO, in the community that was so trapped in intergenerational prostitution.
Well, I'm impressed that, having witnessed it, you managed to keep the amount of compassion you have for your characters, because you kind of see them all are trapped in this system. But I loved your talk about Baba. I love his transformation, and her brother, Salman. He was, just these characters who are really sort of showing up for each other in their imperfect ways. So how did Hira come to you? I love, one of my favorite quotes is, "Fiction is the lie that tells the truth," and you have been telling the nonfiction version of this story for your entire career. But how did Hira come to you as a vehicle to kind of tell this fictionalized story?
I began writing I Kick and I Fly when a girl just like Hira won a gold medal in karate in my NGO Apne Aap. And, I thought, here's a true story which is hopeful. It's about a subject which is really dark, but here is a community and here's a girl who's come through, and she's going to lead the way for so many people. So that's when I wanted to share the story with the world, because I felt my heart would burst when that happened. And then I stopped writing because the work took over, and then I had the gift of the lockdown in a way where I had time to pause and write. And I wanted to share hope with the world, because I realized that so many kids are going through very difficult times, and they need to know that there are stories, there are experiences where adversity can be overcome and we can triumph. And I had a true story to tell. I told it as fiction. The reason I chose fiction as my medium was because I wanted to get under the skin of characters, because I have been a book addict all my life, and to me, fiction was always more powerful than non-fiction because it made me imagine. I could empathize with the characters more, and that's exactly what I did with Hira. And sometimes, when I was writing, I wrote the beginning and the end of the story first, and the middle was the hard part.
It always is, Ruchira.
Oh, yeah.
It's called the spongy middle, and any writer here will tell you the middle always sucks. So, but you ate dessert before you finished your middle, so I'm impressed. Or you're not.
And then, literally the characters would sometimes come and talk to me at night. Like Hira would talk or Salman would talk, and I would wake up early in the morning to finish writing. It was almost like dictation. And Sam Palazzi is here. She's my brilliant editor who is sitting in the audience. And thank you, David, for making the match because nothing could have been better. But I almost was responding so fast to what Hira was telling me that the book is like a fast-paced page turner. It's like a social justice adventure. And I wrote it fast, and there was action after action. And Sam would say, slow it down, put in the texture of the place you're writing about. And then I would shut my eyes and imagine. I would try to hear the sounds, I would try to smell what I was writing about, and then add that into the book. So it's a process.
I mean, it always is, and I'm glad that you did that because it adds to the vibrancy of it. But I think it comes across on the page, that intensity that you felt, that sort of compulsion to get the story out, where you don't even feel like you're writing as so much as channeling something. And that usually, I think, translates to a reading experience too, because that's how it reads. It reads like, just keep going. It's just so incredibly fast. And one of the things I have been talking to people about this book is like, I think if you hero, it's a book about a 14-year-old, who's, lives between these brothels, and her family wants to sell her into sex slavery, and she gets out. You think, oh, this is going to be such a slog. It's going to be torture porn, and it's not. It reads with this just kinetic, lively energy, and it was delightful. So, does the real Hira know that you fictionalized her?
There's not but many Hiras, that's the truth. And now there are many girls in my NGO, Apne Aap, who have won gold medals in karate. A couple of them are karate teachers, and many of them have finished school, graduated, are doctors and lawyers, once even a police officer. So life has moved on, and the karate classes continue in that red light area in Forbesganj. But the red light area is no longer the same red light area that I write about in the book. There were 72 brothels when I began working there, and now there are just 2. And that is because of girls like Hira. They had the courage to fight back. It's because of people like Mai, who you will read about in the book. She's the mother of Hira. How she stood up to injustice, how she organized with other women. And, 20 years later, since starting the NGO, all I can report is that change is possible, and change which begins small and, begins at the bottom is like a tree. So it has deep roots and it bears fruit. So these are the things that I learned, and those are the lessons I want to share with the next generation. Because I can see in America that in so many schools, kids are becoming activists. They want to make their world a better place. And so I think my book is kind of timely for them, because they will be able to empathize with girls like Hira, and they will be able to join my movement to create a world in which no child is bought or sold. And my book is almost like a call to action, that join the movement and do what you can. And there's one more thing I want to add to that, Gayle. Like, the other learning I have, which is there in the book, like an underlying thread, is that when you do something, you don't know if it's big or small, right? It's only time that shows it, but you have to do it as if it matters. And so what Hira is doing, she did it as if it mattered. What her mother did, they did it. Even Salman, her brother, who says, I'm going to drop out of school even though I love science and I'm good at it, because what's the point of my dreams if your dreams are crushed?
You said earlier something you say to young people about like changing the world or feeling hopeless. Like, what? Can you repeat that? Because I thought it was pretty powerful.
I think the young people are already changing the world, and which is what we can see every time I go on YouTube or Instagram. There's a call to action. Somebody's speaking against guns, somebody's talking about racism, somebody's talking about sexuality, and they are pretty open and vocal about it. And we couldn't have spoken about these issues 20 years ago because somebody would have sheltered us and protected us and not even told us about it. I remember I used to feel so frustrated growing up because my half the things which were prevalent in my world, nobody would talk to me about it. So I would go and steal my parents' books and read their magazines to find out what was going on. And I think that is the same thing with uh, sex trafficking. It's happening all around us. The United Nations says it's the second largest crime in the world. The numbers are staggering. More than 25 million people are trapped in situations of sex trafficking anywhere in our world right now. The majority who are trafficked are children and girls. And in America, the average age of a girl being sex trafficked is between 13 and 15. And yet we say we won't talk to kids about it. That is kind of stupid because if we want to prevent it, we have to equip our kids with the knowledge and give them the tools to fight back rather than being keeping silent and sheltering them. We have to break the silence. And this book is about breaking the silence.
And not something that's happening over there. I mean, the narrative starts in India, but it ends here in Queens. And it really does show that this is something that you may not see. It's probably invisible to most of us, but it is very much happening here, to a shocking degree, because we don't see it. I mean, even where they wind up finding her friend, sorry, spoiler, it's, you would walk by it. It's a restaurant. You would know.
Absolutely. And it is something in plain sight but invisible because it's a tough thing. When you see a 19-year-old shivering at a street corner, and she is got makeup on her and she's got a kind of smile on her. It's a fake smile, but you feel you can't do anything about it, so then you sort of suppress the idea of even knowing about it. But coping is not about ignoring a problem. The way to really deal with the problem is to confront it, because then we can end it.
The thing that you said to me earlier, which I will repeat, you said to young people, is you said, don't look up, look out.
Oh, no, actually I said, look at each other.
Look at each other, don't look up, look at each other. Yeah.
Because that's the other thing I write about in my book, that there's nothing more powerful than a community coming together to bring about change, something it cares about.
And not waiting for someone to come and make it happen for you.
Yeah. Someone high up out there who's going to come and save us. We have to save each other.
So normally when I read a book, I'm one of those people, I don't read the ending, but I will read like the acknowledgements first or the author's note first, but in this case I did not. So as I'm reading this book about sex trafficking in India and Kung Fu, I'm like, wow, Ruchira's got quite an imagination. This is amazing. And then I get to the end and I realize like, this is actually true. So can you talk a little bit about weaving that into the story, why it was so important to bring that aspect of your work, and sort of what that represents both in your real life work with Apnea, but also in Hira's journey?
That's a big question, but I'll try to answer it in a short way. So one of the things is that, I feel that right now all the messaging to us is always so negative. We are made to live in fear that this is going wrong and that's going wrong and that's going wrong. But actually, there are so many small acts of resistance and community organizing where things are going right. And we don't talk about it because it doesn't seem interesting enough. And I think it is very, very interesting how humanity comes together and solves issues, because we've had to do it down the ages. And I feel that those who want to control us want us to live in fear. And I want us to lose the fear. And the only way we can lose the fear is looking at all the positive acts of humanity. So that's why I thought, the importance of IKickandIFly is that it's a true story. It's based on the fact that people overcame their fear from different generations. There's a kid, there's an adult, there's a middle-aged person, there's a very old person. and they challenged something that seemed very entrenched, crime lord, selling girls year after year for generations, a community which believed that this was custom and tradition, and yet there was this community which could change it around. So, instead of feeling fearful, I think if we just start acting and doing things to save ourselves and look at each other to help us, we can do it. So that's why my acknowledgements is, and the end, the epilogue that you're talking about, and I don't want to give it away, is that it's not a vision for the future, it's all true.
There's some Bruce Lee quotes speckled through, and the one that comes back a couple times is the only help is self-help, which I think in our world of self-help has a different meaning, but it's a very empowering quote. You want to talk about why you used that one a couple times?
Yeah, because what Bruce Lee said resonated with me, because this is what I found in Apne Aap. Apne Aap in Hindi, actually that's the name of my NGO. It means self-action. And when we were organizing to set up the NGO, it was very interesting. We were thinking about a name, and I wanted to choose a name in Hindi which the women who were going to change their destiny would understand. In the brothels of Bombay, I had to find a word which they would connect with. And the idea was that we won't look to anyone else to come and save us, because everyone was bullying the women in the red light areas of Mumbai. There was discrimination, there was oppression, and there was stigma. So, the idea of creating the NGO was that the mothers would come together and form a circle to save their daughters. So we were thinking of a song. There's a very famous Hindi song by a singer called Kishori Amonkar, and in which she says, "You are the gardener, and you are the flower, and you're also the person who plucks the flower and puts it on yourself." And the word "apne aap" comes up in that song again and again. So we chose that song, and we chose that word.
What does it translate to, more or less?
Self-action.
Self-action. I mean, it also just makes me feel
Collective self-action.
It just makes me feel a little exhausted. I'm like, women, do we have to do everything?
With a little help from friends.
Yes, but when you do it collectively, it doesn't feel that way. I don't want you to talk. I want to talk more about the book, but I do want to. The story of how you came to do this kind of activism, I think, is so telling of the person you are. So, can you briefly talk about that?
Yes, I can, but most, I used to be a journalist, and I was hiking through the hills of Nepal when I came across rows of villages with missing girls. And I was kind of puzzled, and I asked the men who were sitting around drinking tea, playing cards, where the girls were. And they said they all are in Bombay, which is like 1,500 kilometers away. And I couldn't understand how so many girls could be in such a faraway place from these remote Himalayan towns. So I followed the trail, and I found little girls locked up in small rooms, raped by multiple men, and for years. And as a human being, I was upset. As a woman, I was angry. As a journalist, I felt I had to do something about it, So I decided to tell the story. I made a documentary, The Selling of Innocence. I won an Emmy for it for outstanding investigative journalism. And then I decided I would use the Emmy and the documentary not to build a career in journalism, but to make a difference. So I did a few things. I took the Emmy as my badge and went to the United Nations and to the US Congress and showed the documentary there and asked for changes in law, and succeeded. So today we have the US law, which is called the Trafficking Victim Protection Act, and in the UN we have the UN Protocol to End Trafficking in Persons, and I'm proud to say I played a part in it. But it wasn't enough, because I felt I still had to go back to the women who had told their story in my documentary because they wanted to save their daughters, and ask them what could I do for them. And they said 4 things. They wanted school for their children, they wanted a job which was safe and free of violence, they wanted a room of their own, Virginia Woolf, which was again where they would be safe, and punishment of their traffickers. And that became my business plan for the NGO. And we hired a teacher and put a straw mat on the floor and began. And fast forward now, you have I Kick and I Fly, and many girls like Hira who, finished school, finished college, have jobs, mothers who exited prostitution and traffickers in jail. So we did it, and we did it law by law and girl by girl. So that's my story, and that's where the hope comes from. Not from talking about it, but actually doing the thing.
Again, very telling of who you are. So,
well, that's how we became friends too.
It is how we became friends. It is. And I was thinking of you last week as I was peeing in the San Francisco airport, because they have signs on stalls now in multiple languages. I haven't seen them at Kennedy here, but our airport is terrible. But it was like, okay, I feel like the work you are doing is part of that. So I was very.
And Gayle and I met when I was in UNICEF in New York. And at that time too, I was working on communications for child protection and women's empowerment. And Gayle was working in 17. And I was trying to get her to interview my boss, Karen Bellamy, who was a staunch feminist. And that's how we met.
And I didn't want to interview her. I'm like, give me some teenagers.
Yes.
So tell me about the characters here. Do they still talk to you? Do you still hear from them? Yeah?
Yeah, I have so many more stories which I feel I've left out in the book. I think Salman, the brother of Hira, who wants to be a scientist, and there's no lab in his class. So, because in poor schools, they are not equipped with labs. So what happens to him? And I have some ideas about what can happen to him. Or Hira tells me that she wanted to be a teacher, but she didn't quite know what kind of a teacher. So I want to see where does she go. What kind of a teacher does she become eventually? We'll see, So they tell me sometimes.
Do you think you might, I don't know if you want to tease your next book in a minute, but do you think you might return to this world and write about these characters or different characters?
I think I will return to this world always, all my life, because ending human trafficking is my cause. And I write books, I invent different ways of telling the story, and every time I do, I make a difference, right? So if I tell the story in a documentary, The Selling of Innocence, that makes a difference. If I write a book, I am so sure now, after interacting with booksellers and librarians and teachers and even young people, young teenagers who talked to me just yesterday, that already people are talking about this subject. I have begun to break the silence, and there's going to be a ripple effect. I know that it's a message in a bottle, but people are finding the bottle, and something is going to happen. We've created lots of resources. Scholastic has helped me create a reader's guide for adults, which is a very good thing, for teachers and parents, so they can talk to young people about these subjects. And I have hope again with the book. And, there will definitely be some ways that I will always talk about these characters again and again and again. And I don't know how. I think, the characters might tell me, my editor might tell me, it could be anything, who knows?
Well, that seems like a good segue as any to get you to read a passage, and then we can open it up to audience questions. And if you don't have any, I have a bunch more, but I'll stop talking for a bit. So will you read it for us and set it up for us?
Okay, this is Hira, the 14-year-old protagonist, the hero of my book. She's the one who is born in a nomadic tribe. She's bullied in school because she's too hungry to focus on her lessons. She's also bullied because she comes from the red light area and she's from a tribe. When she's being teased by this boy, she beats him up. The principal expels her. And she thinks her days are numbered because she feels that there's no food at home. Her only source of food was school, and her father, who's an alcoholic, works for the local crime lord and wants to sell her into prostitution. And now she thinks that there's no way to fight back until, as you know, the women's rights advocate enrolls her in a kung fu program, and then she begins a different journey. She lives in the red light area. There is danger all around her. The crime lord knows that she's turning 14 and this is the time to sell her when the cattle fair comes to town. And he hates the fact that she is still going to school and her mother wants to keep her in school and that she's begun to learn Kung Fu. So in the middle of all of this is what happens. His footsteps become louder. A hand comes down over my mouth. Another arm holds me in an iron grip. The man is strong, but so am I. I do a back kick into his groin as hard as I can. He yells in pain. Even if I can't break free, I can slow him down. Another set of footsteps gets louder and louder, and the next thing I know, my mother's shouting, "Let her go! What are you doing? Let her go!" "Get out of my way," the man yells back. He's still holding me tight. I jab him with a back elbow thrust and we stumble onto the uneven earth. The cold ground gives me some relief. More voices take up the space between us, people who have come out of their homes. My aunt, a neighbor or two. "What's happening?" a woman yells. "What's going on?" It's Salman's voice. I can see his fury through the fingers spanning my face, and use the distraction to open my mouth and bite the man as hard as I can. The man lets out a yelp. He stinks. A body odor of country liquor, sweat, and grease. Finally, his grip loosens enough that I squirm away. As soon as I'm free, I take gulps of clean air. A crowd has formed, and it is formidable. I'm safe. My lane feels different, even in the short time since I got the medal for karate. As if the medal is for all of us, a source of pride.
So am I right? Does this book not read like just like an action adventure tale? It's just like boom, 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 boom. I mean, it's not all fight scenes, but I think it all has that propulsive energy. It's such a great debut. I was so thrilled when I read this. I was so thrilled to see all the attention it was getting. It's deserved. I would love to open it up to the audience. We have a growing audience here. It's always hardest to ask the first question, but I know you have them. Oh no, it's not hard at all. Okay. David?
All right, so I agree full-heartedly with Gayle that it's amazing that you pull off both these very physical action scenes really well and also these very quiet emotional scenes. So I'm curious, as an author, which was harder for you to do? Do you tend to write the action and then dive into the emotions, or do you tend to lead with emotions?
Good question.
Yeah, well, David Levithan is asking the question, and he's the one, when he when he acquired my book from Scholastic, the reason I chose Scholastic was him, because in our editorial meeting, he said that this book is based on truth and hope, and that's why I want the book, and I thought, he's got it. So now this question equally is as profound. I did write the action first. It was easier because it was like then I would know the plot. And then I began to shut my eyes and think about the emotions, and even then it was not enough till the book got into the hands of Sam, who said, "Now pace it out, and now I realize when I read some of the initial reviews in Kirkus or in Publishers Weekly where people are saying they like the texture, they can visualize the places I'm talking about. Somebody told me just yesterday, I was giving an interview and they said you could actually smell and see the streets. And I know how we came to that, how I literally added all those dimensions. I knew it, but I was in such a hurry to tell the story that I didn't want to face the emotions, especially David Greenlight. I did not want to write about her emotions.
Really? Why not? Can you explain who Rini D is?
Rini D is the women's rights advocate who enrolls Hira into a Kung Fu program, and she's the hostel owner who helps vulnerable children.
Can you explain what a hostel is? Because I think if you haven't read the book, it has different meaning here.
So a hostel in Forbesganj, Bihar is a residential building connected to a government school, which is for kids from the village. And the hostel is attached to the school because there are many kids who are hungry or homeless and can't really go to school if they don't have a roof over their heads or food in their stomachs or even help with homework in the evenings. So this hostel provides that safe space for them to be able to sleep at night, to be able to bathe, because where Hira grows up, she doesn't even have a toilet. She has to go to the railway platform. And many of the mud huts that I write about, they did not have windows and doors when I was working there. Now it's all changed. And I remember I would tell the women that, why can't you go to Calcutta to speak in a conference? And they would say, but where will we leave our children? And I said, well, in the hut. And they said, but it doesn't even have doors and windows. So somebody will come and take them away and there's nothing to protect them. So all these things, I had to bring in, shut my eyes and go back in time to write about, because, you forget as you succeed what you've overcome. And that was hard. So Rini was the person who set up this hostel, because she realized that if the kids are living in the red light area, the traffickers will find them very tempting to kidnap and sell, and which happened, right? And then the hostel itself became a magnet for the traffickers to try and come and heckle the girls, threaten the girls. Sometimes in real life, the hostel that my NGO ran, the kidnappers would come and jump over walls to steal the kids. So we had to make the wall higher. We had to put a security guard outside. Women Rini Di is that person who's the activist, who's the feminist, who holds a rally right next to the red light area, and all the women in the red light area watching, they agree with her, but they can't go up to her because they're scared of the men who will beat them up. So that's Rini Di.
So she's you.
Yeah.
I mean, was that why she was hard to write? You basically just described yourself.
A little bit, partially. She's not fully me. I don't practice kung fu.
Okay. Fine. But beyond that, okay, great. So,
I'm a feminist.
I've noticed. Right up here.
In this new America, where we're banning books right and left, how has it changed or affected what you're doing in certain places, or is this book somehow flying under the radar right now?
This book is just 2 days old, and so far I've been to Texas, and I've been to New Orleans, and I've been to Springfield, Massachusetts, and somewhere else. I'm trying to remember, but anyway, I've traveled a bit, and so far the book has managed not to polarize. And that's exactly what I'm trying to say to people, that there does not need to be polarization. We can come together around issues which are important to our young people, because they are the present and the future. So let's not, deal with division. Let's deal with unity. And let's figure out a way to save our humanity, really. Because, and I talk about an issue which happens to young people, but nobody talks to them about, right?
Well, that's what I was wondering.
So
it seems to be putting a lid on me.
So hopefully, my message will work.
I feel like the book bannings are so nonsensical. It's always nonsensical with book bannings, but now, it's just for the sake of creating that anger. So who knows? Who knows? I hope not. I hope nothing stands in the way of you and a reader.
Yeah, because as Gloria Steinem says, this book could save lives. And so if somebody tries to stop this book from reaching a young person, they might do something which would take away an opportunity from a young person.
I agree.
In the back.
Apologies if it's been asked before, but you mentioned so casually noticing these girls and just going to the place that they were. How did you find the courage to even get involved with such a situation?
When you do something, you don't know that it requires courage. And so when I asked a question of the men in Nepal, that where are the girls, I didn't know that I would end up in the brothels of Bombay. When I was in the brothels of Bombay and talking to the women, I had gone with a film crew. And I didn't know that somebody would pull out a knife at my throat and I would think I'm going to die any second. So, the courage came later when I actually sat and processed what I was doing. When I was in the red light area in Forbesganj and encouraging the women to hold meetings, and I was starting a classroom, I thought, I'm starting a classroom. Nobody's going to say no to kids coming and sitting on a straw mat in this little community center when I do it. So initially, I didn't know. It's only later that I began to find the courage again and again.
I've heard Ruchira tell stories of like staying up all night to keep the police at bay. When I was with her, she took me to the red light district in Bombay and just walked through and talked to everybody. I mean, I think you talked to the pimps, you talked to the women. Like, I was like, what the? And this is just her. She's just made of steel. Some people are like that. So I agree with what she says, that sometimes like you don't know that you're doing something that requires courage until after, but I also think she has a different threshold from the rest of us mortals. Anybody who knows her will know that. All right, more questions. We have 10 minutes, so let's get them in right there. Thank you.
Me?
Yes, you.
Oh, brilliant. Ruchira, congratulations. So exciting. I'm curious, like, I love hearing that you're still so positive after all these years in this space and after everything you've witnessed. And I'm just curious, so many people in the audience have teenagers or we deal with young people every day. And I've never thought of like, how can I bring like a positive element to it? But I'm just wondering, through the lens that you wrote the book, what would you say to people who engage with young people about how to enter into a situation that you might not be sure what's happening? I know so many people are like not sure, they don't want to step on toes. But we know that the only way to provide a way out is getting a little uncomfortable. So what would you say to those folks?
That's a really good question, because we always wonder that are we going to put young people at risk or even, add trauma in their lives or whatever. So these are issues we have to think about. But, the young people are going to face challenges in their lives anyway. They are going to have to overcome trauma anyway. So what better way than teaching them how to do it, and what better way than storytelling? Because stories build empathy, and a story which has both danger and hope is the best way to talk to a young person about. So this is why I think IKickandIFly will work, because it's got hope, and it's not like some fantasy hope, it's based on truth. So there are ways to do it, and we have to find the ways. And Gayle, somebody was asking me that how do I find the hope in what I'm doing? I find it in the community, because again and again I found a community which has come forward and supported me. Like today in this book, like all of you have come to Brooklyn, and I know many of you don't live in Brooklyn. So it's a trek, and you've done it because you are my community. And even when the knife was pulled out at me in Bombay in this brothel, I thought I would be dead because there was just one exit and the trafficker was blocking that exit. And there was a small window on one side, and I thought, okay, I'm gone. And the women suddenly surrounded me and told the man that if you have to kill her, you've got to kill us first. And these are supposed to be powerless women, but the power of women's collective action, that saved me. And I told the story. So again and again, the power of a community coming together gives me hope. And I've seen this, literally, it sounds banal, but I've really seen it again and again.
Again, congratulations, Ruchi, and what a beautiful evening, both of you doing a fantastic job. I'm going to ask you to comment on two things. One is, I became aware of the sort of fluidity between journalism and fiction from Defoe. Maul Flanders, one of my favorite books, and he talks so much about being a journalist and how it helps him write fiction. And secondly, the most amazing thing about you, which I don't know how many people know about this, but you became an artist while you were writing this book. And such a fabulous, magnificent artist. So how did all this come together? How did this sort of fountain of creativity suddenly appear in you? So you've been a journalist, you've been a writer all your life, but this fiction is so, it's just as you said, so striking.
And the question is being asked by Dr. Azra Raza, who's a cancer doctor. And she is literally researching the first cell, which will stop us from even having to deal with the last cell in cancer. And she herself is very multifaceted and is like she can recite poetry and remembers poetry at the drop of a hat. She writes. Anyway, sorry. So how did I end up doing this? I think I always wanted to be a writer since I was 10 years old, and I had a published article in my school magazine to prove it called Pencil Ki Atmakatha, which means the autobiography of a pencil. And it's maybe 200 words, I don't know. But, and then, I became a journalist because that was the job which was available. And journalism took me to to these villages in Nepal. I ended up making The Selling of Innocence, and one thing led very organically to another. And, I still wanted to write that story. But somehow I never had the time, and the lockdown gave me time to pause. I had seen a lot of pain and trauma during the COVID when it hit India, because all of you must have seen images of people being evicted, walking home, dying of hunger, and I ran a food drive, which actually gave food to more than 500,000 women and girls at that time. But, I was thinking that, the world is a crazy, horrible place. Let me just give up. And my dad had a heart attack at that time, and I couldn't go to him, flights were closed, and finally I did. And for 5 months we were together as a family. We all got COVID, healed together, but we were together. And it was raining, it was monsoon in India, and my mother's garden was blooming again. So somehow I felt a sense of hope, and I wanted to share the hope with the world. And what better way than being creative? I just felt something happened very profound during COVID. So I ended up writing the story, which I had stopped writing because I wanted to share it with young people. And I ended up painting because I wanted to get the colors and the sense of life in the world again. So basically it's sharing hope. And I'm still a hopeaholic because hope is the only true form of planning.
Hope it's an action verb. It's not an abstract thing. It's something you work toward. I also love this image of the garden, especially after you told us where Afiap comes from, and this idea that you have to plant and grow and pick. And so it's a garden that rejuvenated your creative spirit. That's lovely. All right, I think we have time for maybe one more question. Who wants to go last? No pressure. Yes, you.
Congratulations for this endeavor, and thank you for all the work that you do. I am curious when we might see a book detailing your amazing life.
Where's your memoir? What's going on with that?
I will write it one day for sure, because again, I think that's a story worth sharing, because even I wouldn't have known this. I would do all these things. And even now, I don't know what I'll do next. And I have someone from my high school who's here in the room, and she knows that, we came from an all-girls school, and, for us, the future was really most likely to get married and have children and not think about careers. And we both did something different, and here we are, So I think life unfolds, and it depends on what you choose in that moment, and then the next thing and the next thing. But the thing is, we have to embrace life, and we have to not let those opportunities pass by. And I have also another thing, I was brought up in a very Gandhian household. My father still wears homespun. He went to jail in India's freedom struggle as a 15-year-old boy. And they always told me that, they never asked me, what do you do? They would ask me, what do you do for others? So I grew up with that. It was like the ethic at home.
It's beautiful. And that explains sort of how you wound up here, writing this beautiful book, IKickandIFly. You can buy a copy of Wonderful Greenlight. Ruchira will sign it for you. I want to thank Greenlight for hosting us. This has been amazing. I love this space. Thank you all for coming. Ruchira, you get the last word.
Buy the book, share it with a young person you know, and this story is going to have legs which will probably save lives and help me save those lives.